Inside the 11th deck white room, astronaut Glenn steps in and is patted on the arm by a couple of the workmen on the 11th deck who are dressed in their white smocks and white cap. And now Glenn walks up the few steps and is removing the dust galoshes, the overshoes, which are to protect his shoes and keep them as free of dirt as possible. And momentarily, they're off now, and puts his right, then left foot in and moves in first part of his body through the hatch, holding on with both hands for a moment or so, then with one hand on a hold bar above the relatively small hatchway, making his way very carefully into the capsule, into the spacecraft, and is being helped by the suit technician Joe Schmidt and by a NASA technician, a NASA inspector.
Streeter of GU-308, 3108, that's the Streeter.
T-minus 10 seconds, counting. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff. The MA-6 vehicle has lifted off. The MA-6 vehicle has lifted off. Trajectory looks good. The MA-6 vehicle is off the launch pad at 47 minutes after the hour. It is climbing nicely. All systems are reported go.
Astronaut John Glenn is almost certainly going to be in orbit, going to be our first man in orbit within a few seconds from now. As a matter of fact, the decision is being made around now as to whether to put him in orbit. And if all systems aboard the spacecraft are holding out, and we seem to think they are from what Mercury Control tells us, Colonel Glenn will soon be the free world and America's first man to undergo orbital flight.
And here's the big map on which we're going to follow John Glenn the best we can. Bermuda, the tracking station importantly outlined by Jules Bergman right here. The capsule in this vicinity, the next checking point to be this ship out here in mid-Atlantic. All goes well, passes this ship. The next stop is going to be here at Grand Canary Island. Then across the continent of Africa. You'll notice this dot-dash system illustrates the first orbit. This will be his second orbit here, and this will be the third orbit if they decide that he has time for all three orbits. Let's go back to Cape Canaveral now and Jules Bergman.
A feeling of elation, a feeling of pride, and a feeling of achievement here at Cape Canaveral with what seems to be almost certainly our first manned orbital flight. In a few seconds from now, we're going to hear the actual voice of Colonel John Glenn during takeoff from the Friendship 7 Mercury spacecraft. We're going to get that report direct from our ABC tape center right now.
Roger, 0G, and I feel fine. Capsule is turning around. Oh, that view is tremendous. Roger, turnaround has started. Capsule turning around, and I could see the booster during turnaround just a couple of hundred yards behind me. It was beautiful.
Roger, 7. You have a go, at least 7 orbits.
Roger, understand go for at least 7 orbits. This is Friendship 7. Can see clear back a big cloud pattern way back across toward the Cape. Beautiful sight.
So, summing up again, 4 hours and 56 minutes, Bill Trudell, was your estimate. That jives with our clocks, give or take a second or two. An historic mission for the United States spaceflight program after years of waiting and months of delay. Colonel John Glenn's 3 orbits of the Earth are an auspicious start, and to which we might add that 3 more of these 3-orbit journeys were planned this year up to this point, and 2 18-orbit journeys of the Earth by our Project Mercury astronaut. However, the singular success of this flight may lead to changes in our spaceflight program. What may happen now is because of the success of this flight and also the delay. You'll remember the flight had been scheduled originally in late December. Because of this delay and the flight success, we may decide on only 2 more 3-orbit missions and then proceed directly to the 18-orbit missions. That, for the first time, would carry us within the striking distance of the Soviet Union's record with Soviet cosmonaut Major German Titov.
Oh.
But Yes, Bill?
In case the helicopters do beat the destroyer to the capsule, we want to show our audience here an animated sketch of what will be happening out there.
Okay.
The animated sketch of the helicopters hovering over the capsule. We've seen pictures of it in the case of Commander Shepard and of Gus Grissom. But this particular sketch is animated. The helicopter hovers over the capsule, and you'll soon see him dropping a line to the capsule, hooking on to the capsule for the recovery by means of helicopter.
At Cape Canaveral now, a feeling of quiet elation, a feeling of satisfaction. The first step in our manned spaceflight program has been achieved. A substantial step, not a small one, not a huge one, but a very substantial one that bodes well for the planning of our program in the future.
We're waiting here at ABC Space Headquarters so that we can switch from here to any point of particular interest at the moment. At any point where we have the ABC cameras or reporters. You saw New Concord, Ohio. We have our reporter Dave Nichols standing by at Arlington, Virginia, at the home of Colonel Glenn, just in case, as we expect, Mrs. Glenn will make an appearance there for the first time today. Washington, D.C., the White House, the President of the United States.
Blue polka dot tie. Mrs. Kennedy standing in the doorway in a wine-colored suit.
Voice of reporter Ray Shear.
Past reporters. Temperature's 43. Chilly here.
I know that I expressed the great happiness and thanksgiving of all of us that Colonel Glenn has completed his trip, and I know that this is particularly felt by Mrs. Glenn and his two children. A few days ago, Colonel Glenn came to the White House and visited me, and he was, as are the other astronauts, the kind of American of whom we are most proud. Some years ago, as a Marine pilot, he raced the sun across this country and lost. And today, he won. I also want to say a word for all those who participated with Colonel Glenn at Canaveral. They faced many disappointments and delays. The burdens upon them were great, but they kept their heads and they made a judgment, and I think their judgment's been vindicated. We have a long way to go in the space race. We started late, but this is the new ocean, and I believe the United States must sail on it and be in a position second to none. Some months ago, I said that I hoped that every American would serve his country. Today, Colonel Glenn served his, and we all express our thanks to him.